Hey, if you'd like to earn CEUs for this webinar, join the Safeopedia community at the link in the description below. Now, on to the show.
What is your crisis response plan? That's how my day started. It was pretty normal. It was pretty routine. I was really excited. I did do a double take. No, wait, a triple take at the kitchen table. And I left my laptop there. I did grab my fanny pack and my journal and I hit the road. I was confident and I was comfortable. So you can imagine my surprise the next time. You can imagine my surprise an hour later when I'm standing on the sidewalk outside my house listening to a firefighter tell me that there had been a devastating fire and mostly everything was gone. What did he say? There was a fire. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Asked me something about insurance and then said something about what valuables do I want from the house? So this did not fit well into my life. What exactly is a crisis? Now, there are a lot of definitions you will find on the internet, and I find two that really resonate with me, for me. And I think when we bring them together, they make one really solid definition of a crisis. First definition states it's a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. Now, this to me is the external forces, the antagonist, if you will, the situation. Definition number two is it's an intense internal feeling of confusion and anxiety. The anxiety comes from the uncertainty. So you can imagine me standing there listening to this firefighter, utterly confused, and a whole bunch of anxiety. And what this does to us is it affects our coping mechanisms. So what I have in place regularly to handle my day-to-day fails me, and I'm left with ineffective decisions and behaviors that maybe start to lead out into my life. I think it's a moment to pause again here because this has been a fantastic conference. We are talking about so much mental health and safety for the people we work with and for ourselves. And the challenge I have as someone who still rocks the boots in the field is a lot of material that's sent to the end user uses language like in time of crisis, rely on your coping skills, and don't forget about self-care. And what we're learning is we have gone below coping. Okay, we are in a state of mental health first aid, mental health crisis. So asking me to rely on coping mechanisms in this particular incident don't do very well. If you were to take the time to actually Google stages of a crisis, you will find a plethora of results. I think it was just under just over 100 million. And you'll find stages ranging from 4 to 9 when we start to talk about crisis. This is really going to depend on the types of modalities that you buy into. Today, I want to talk to you about 4 of them, and really we're going to dial into 2 of them to help us build this personal crisis response plan that I'm talking about. So of the 4 stages, we have a pre-crisis stage. If we were intuitive enough and through the conversations we've been having, be able to pay attention to some of our behaviors, we would be able to monitor what's going on for us. But generally, a pre crisis stage, outside of what happened to me, we might be inundated with a lot of people recognizing we're off and asking us, hey, is everything okay? Well, we all know that okay is borderline blah. And it's just really an invitation for me to say, please leave me alone. And you get enough information that you wander off going, hey, I did my check in. They said they're okay. We have the crisis itself. So some of the modalities, they call this the acute stage, and it lasts for 24 up to 48 hours. That is a long time. Then we start to go into a response phase, and this is where some modalities can really break it down. You've got your first 24 hours, and then the 24 hours after that. And I have a good friend of mine who helped me during my time of crisis with the fire. It said, it's the first 72 hours. And after that, it's the first 7 days. And after that, it's the first 2 weeks. And then from there, we just build and build and build. And the last stage that I feel nobody pays particular attention to is the time to recover. So after my fire, I'm driving home from Chilliwack. I realized where my fur baby was going to be emergency sheltered was not going to work out. And my mind was not handling it well. But at the same time, I was curious about how fast I should be healing from this. See, the fire was Thursday and this was Saturday, and my expectations were I'd be further ahead than this. On Monday, when I landed on site, although some of you may be sitting there going, whoa, that was way too soon, it was perfect for me and my brain and what I needed in the moment as a distraction. But many people I was working around felt it was too soon. So time to recovery is something to think about when we start to think about crisis situations. Now, I want to play around a little bit here. I'm going to share this and see if I can engage you guys in a different way. So this is an interactive whiteboard, and I'm hoping you can see it, and I would love it if you took the time, if you can. And Tamara, if somebody's commenting that they can't see it, then I'll just ixnay this and we won't go with that. But I'd love for you to share what you feel some crises are, or crises as it's spelled with the ES for plural.
So I'm watching the chat, Leslie, to see what people are putting in. If people have some idea, hey, Joshua, do you have anything that you can share with us? I see you there. Elaine. I think maybe people are typing. Let's just give them a moment.
Perfect.
Family issues. John Mark shares. Auto accident by Enrich. Colleen, serious car accident.
Yeah.
Anything else, guys? Health issues?
What about a job loss?
Handicap?
So what about a job loss for our community listeners?
Sarah says job loss and financial loss.
Perfect.
Stephen says financial loss and college loans. What about when families are in transitions, though? Like I had a teenager, a child for a long time who's now an adult. So we're now kind of navigating different roles. What about something like that? Does that count?
Well, and I think crises are interpretive to each of us personally, because they're going to tax us and our mental health and our coping mechanisms differently. So what may be a crisis for you may not be for me. I know for my daughter, if she loses her phone, not only is it a crisis for her, but it's also a crisis for me because of the world that we live in now. during my so what I found really fascinating about this incident was it only happened quite recently. And in the moment of dealing with my own crisis, I realized that all of my friends were going through crises of their own. How about cyberbullying? That's a pretty huge one. One thing I think we fail to remember or even recognize or talk about specifically when we talk about the construction industry from a mental health perspective. I took a suicide awareness prevention program probably about 2 years ago, and it was directed at the construction industry. And the stat came from, I believe it was Washington State, that said up to 40% of the individuals in the construction industry came from an institutionalized background. So these are individuals who have been charged with crimes and gone to jail, either federally or state, locally. Up here, we would call it provincially. So what if your crisis that you're going through and you're navigating and you need to reach out for help could be what sends you back to jail? When we start to think on terms like this, I think it helps us as health and safety professionals and just people in general what we don't know about other people. The reason I know that the construction industry hires so heavily from an institutionalized perspective is I worked in a jail in the kitchen for a long time, and I got to watch companies come in and do safety training and traffic management training. What if your crisis is you're losing custody of your kids? What if your crisis is you just found out that your partner of X number of years not only has been having an affair, they have another family somewhere else? Like, these are typical day-to-day things that all of us are navigating behind the scenes that we bring to the job site. So I want you to kind of think about these other ones that I've talked about through that type of lens. Like, yes, it's horrible to lose, it's horrible to lose your job. We need to think on this level too. We need to think on the level as to what if somebody within the industry calls and you find out that they did lose the battle. Our suicide rates coming from the session yesterday is 5 times the national average. And one stat I think we don't even mention talking about right now is just the stigma of when I say construction suicide. Who do you see when you hear that? Do you see a hard hat with a vest on and dirty boots and holes in the jeans? Because our industry is bigger than that. The stat that I read about a year ago was the split was 70-30, and it was 70% craft to 30% office. So it's not just about focusing our talks on our craft. We have line management and management above that are not winning these battles when it comes to self-harm. So what happens to you in the acute stage of a crisis? Well, we've heard from many other speakers that this thing up here is beautiful and it's amazing. And for the most part, we lead our lives with the front of it. In a time of crisis, we don't think well for ourselves. So that amygdala way in the back, that reptilian brain you hear talked about, this takes over. This is fight or flight. And you have a huge dump of stressful cortisol mixed into this, and you're trying to grasp onto control, and you realize that there's so much here that's not coming together. You end up feeling hopeless. During my crisis, I'd lived in this place for 5 years. After the fire, for a week solid, I could not remember the address of the house. It blew my mind. It blew my mind. One other thing I noticed, probably for the first 2 days, I could not remember my bank card PIN number. Now, I know many of you are probably watching saying, Leslie, there's infrastructure for that. Like, just get the tap. Well, you just have to have a friend who's lost their wallet and lost a lot of money to that tap privilege to say, I'd rather just remember the 4 numbers. After we go from acute, we're going to go to response, and some of these stages can overlap. The first 24 hours, if I didn't actually take the time to journal what happened, I don't think I would remember in as much detail that day, because there is so much trauma. So we get to respond, but we have to remember that that amygdala is not going to give too much control up here, because every time I get control, I'm emotional and I'm making ineffective decisions, like standing on my back deck going, are you kidding me? I'm not allowed in. I just spent $500 at Costco. What do you mean I'm not allowed in? I'm going in. I'm getting my stuff. Leslie, the house is old enough that you're smart enough by looking at the tiles. It's probably asbestos containing. Rational decision making starts to happen. So, question to you guys, what does security look like when you're losing custody of your children? What does security look like when you're in year 2 of a bitter divorce that's never ending? What does security look like when you have an addiction and you don't know how to break it? And your PO just called and said, you will be testing this week. Lots of our people deal with this every day, every day. One of the questions I've seen before this session asked, how often should we talk to our people about suicide prevention? As someone who survived, and I can stand here confidently and say I'm a survivor of that stage of my life, every day somebody is sitting in a situation where they're struggling with this type of crisis. We can have a conversation. We can take the elephant out of the room and ask them what their thoughts are. What we have to remember is our projection. There are people that don't believe in it, and that's their right. And I think that's why we start to, or at least I have found that I've started to excel in having these conversations, is I make space for the individuals and I allow them to know that, hey, some of you might be listening to me right now and don't care. And the fact that I told you at one point in my life I was contemplating taking it, I realized I probably just lost some respect from you that I'll never get back. And that's okay, because you didn't walk in my shoes. You weren't there that day. You didn't have it all come down on you. But when you have your moment, please know that I will be there for you, because it's scary AF. Ah, yes, scary. Have you ever had a cut where the nerve endings were so sensitive, just the gentle breeze was excruciating? That's what my brain felt like coming out of this incident. And it was all of the nerve endings of my brain were just on fire. And it wasn't just a gentle breeze, it was like a category 5 hurricane. I was going to need help. And this is what we're here to talk about, is how do we do this part? I like definitions. So I went to look up the definition of help, and the definition of help says it's, let me see here. It says it's to make it easier for someone to do something by offering one services or resources. Now I'm going to go out on a huge limb, and that's okay, because you don't have to agree with me. I don't believe there's anything easy about the helping relationship. I believe that there's experience, but there's messiness, there's uncomfortability, there's expectations, there's emotions, and there's feelings, and they're on both sides of the coin. On one side, I have control and cortisol coursing through me, humility, embarrassment, judgment. Judgment. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Why do we not actually end up reaching out for help? Signs you may have trouble reaching out for help. Here, my big one in this bubble, I'm an inconvenience. I know I'm inconveniencing you right now by reaching out and asking you for help, so I'm just not going to. I'm okay, borderline blah, good enough for you to leave me alone, good enough for me to walk away. Only losers ask for help. On one job site I worked a year ago, I remember being in the hole with my superintendent helping out. And all of a sudden I went, oops, sorry. And he looked at me and he says, we don't ever say sorry. And I paused. It took me back. And I thought to myself, wow, where did that get imprinted in you? That this would be something, because I know you won't reach out for help. Can handle it on our own. So maybe that goes back to some of our tougher safety leaders out here and our leaders in these organizations who help all of the time. See, you guys are probably the hardest to help, because you help everybody and you know how to do it, except when it comes to yourself. We have a hard time asking for help. So my offer to you as an individual who needs help, my promise was 3 questions. And these are 3 questions you're going to ask yourself. 1, if a colleague or a loved one was dealing with the same thing that I am dealing with now, would you expect them to reach out for help? And if you can answer yes to that, that should be a big sign that there are a lot of people out there ready to help. They might not have the tools, but they probably have the connections that you need to get some help. Now, if the answer is no, I think you need to dig a little bit deeper. What about this situation makes it not help worthy? We live in a different society. I get to out myself for age. I come from a time when we didn't have cell phones. We actually had to have books with phone numbers in them and actually have a lot of them memorized so we could go to pay phones, drop money in them, and make a call. During my time of crisis, a colleague of mine reaches out who's going through a terrible circumstance, and he loses this and his ability to contact anybody from a phone because he doesn't remember their phone numbers. Things to think about, things that we take for granted. My laptop was on the table, and we live in a cloud society. Now, what if you're those closet clouders that are riding the free and the cloud boxes are full, so you started to dump a whole bunch of stuff onto your C drive? And now you're looking at lost all of that information. That is a true crisis, if I don't say so myself. Chase down your uncertainty, sit with yourself, have this question: where is the uncertainty coming from within you? Are you assuming that other people are judging you? It took me a long time to learn that nobody else was paying attention to all of the stuff that I was paying attention to. I think I was on a jog one time a couple of years ago, feeling really heavy and not proud of myself, and realized nobody else cared. Nobody else saw me as heavy. Nobody else saw me the same way. There's a fantastic ad on television for Peloton. Peloton? I believe that's how I pronounce it. And she says, the only person who can hear the voice inside your head is you. So pay attention to that voice. You need to understand where this anxiety is coming from, this uncertainty. And in extreme cases, like for me, if you're coming through a situation like that, my greatest advice to you would be, if you have the clarity in a moment, start writing down stuff you need. Now, I know we're going to talk about the personal crisis response plan, and we're going to talk about it in different degrees of severity. But my biggest learning lesson from this was, in that moment, if you can carve out some time, start. Because on the other side of the coin, we have the other side of the brain. We have hopelessness. That's our person who needs help, who meets helplessness. These are our helpers, standing there, waiting, asking us, what can I do for you? Sending you prayers, sending you hugs, sending you support. And in your time of need, you truff mumble and you cannot get the words out to tell them what you need. The helpers don't stop. And all of a sudden you may think, gosh, this is irritating. Why don't they leave me alone? Because if those of you who've helped, it feels pretty cool, right? Have you ever done a pay it forward? You buy the person behind coffee and you get that kind of like really cool feeling. It's because when we help people, we get this, it's called a helper's high. So we get oxytocin released and we get so many feel-good chemicals. So on one side, I'm just racing, I'm chomping at the bit. I want to get this chemical release. I want to help you. And all you do is say to me, you don't know. As helpers, we have to accept this, that I don't know. In the extreme cases of right after an acute stage of crisis, people may not be able to understand how to formulate what they need. So as helpers, if these are people who we know and care about, this is when we get to dial in. And this is what I found from the relationship coming through my incident here. I really felt having these conversations with people who were helpers really did help in the long run. And it wasn't, again, it's not making it easy, but it's making it less uncomfortable and less difficult for people. So as helpers, we usually pick up on the pre-crisis stage if the crisis is of a magnitude that you are allowed in that inner circle and it's disclosed to you, you will have that pivotal information. So we would be able to lean in at this time and say, hey, Tamara, it looks like you've been really busy lately, or you haven't been coming to lunch as frequently. Side note, generally when we have a huge disruption in eating patterns is generally something stressful is going on. So it's an opportunity, but maybe we don't want to be nosy or persecuting them and picking at them. So maybe what we could say is, how have you been sleeping? See, when we ask that, one, it's completely disruptive to the thought pattern, what we were expecting to hear. But as people who listen, we get an idea of what's going on. Now, talked about judgment. Please remember that not everybody is a sleep princess and needs 8 hours for sure, legitimate, every night. 7, 6. Ooh, is there a term for hangry but tired? That is this girl. What if we looked at them and said, I know you're going through a lot right now, and it must be hard for you to come to terms with what's going on. So for me, my situation is I drive and I realize this isn't where my cat is going to stay, and I've got to figure out where he's going. My friend grabs me by the shoulders and she says, Leslie, do you need money? Just ask me. Do you ask for money regularly? I don't. That was a very hard lesson to learn through all of this. Humility, dignity, embarrassment, judgment. How much is acceptable to ask for during a time of crisis? For someone like myself who's lost everything, is it acceptable to ask you for $100? How about $1,000? You know what would make it really easy? One, do not do an online charity donation without the individual's express consent. If you have not been through a crisis of this magnitude, at some point you will get tired of telling the story. Okay? Then we can follow up with, this is what I can do for you. You're a vegan? Please let me bring you some meals. Please let me do this stuff for you. Please let me help. This is how much I can give you. Okay? This is where we make amazing strides, because we take that uncomfortableness out of the situation. All right. So I think, Tamara, how are we doing for time? Did I go too far? I've gone too long, haven't I?
That's okay. Yeah, we're at wheel time.
We're at wheel time. All right. So before we wrap up for the wheel, and I apologize. So this is what we do in the job sites. And this is an example of a crisis management plan that I work with the crews. And I help them understand. And we're developing it on a personal basis. So because paper, if you drop it, could be a little uncomfortable. But over to the wheel. Sorry, I got too excited, Tamara.
No, please share your plan.
Right. For myself, when I think about the plan, and when I take a look at this, I think to myself, when we think about it from a severity perspective, in the first 24 hours, when you've lost everything, you could be looking at this from a perspective of security and safety, and where am I going to live? Some of the things that I learned that you guys should do you have copies of your documentation? Where are your originals kept? Your birth certificate, your passport? Do you have photocopies of this stuff? You need it. Did you know if you change insurance providers, they're going to want to see proof of your education? Finding your diplomas you earned from 20 years ago is a pain. Having this stuff put away is phenomenal. And then having other things in place really do make going through these crises phenomenal. Yes, absolutely. Have people in your phone that you can make emergency calls to, but there's definitely more to it.